Imagine this. You're standing in a room filled with people you know, friends, family, co-workers. Everyone is smiling, small talk, laughter. Your face wears the mask you've mastered over the years. You nod, you joke, you even laugh. But inside something clenches. There's a slow, quiet panic beneath the surface, like standing on a frozen lake and hearing the first crack. You can't quite name it. Is it anxiety, emptiness, shame? All you know is that you're tired. Not tired like needing sleep, but tired of having to be okay. Tired of performing strength. Tired of holding yourself together with invisible thread. Now imagine someone says something small, a joke, a critique, a passing glance, and somehow it stings. Not because it was cruel, but because it touched something raw inside you. And for a split second, the mask slips. You flinch. You feel exposed. Then you pull yourself together again, quickly, silently, expertly. The mask resets. No one notices. But deep down, the echo lingers. Why does it hurt so much? That one comment, that silent treatment, that forgotten text. Why does something so minor unravel you? Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." You think it's what they said, what they did, what they didn't do. But the truth is harder and more liberating. It's not what happens to you that causes the pain. It's what within you it touches. You believe you are reacting to the world, but what you are really doing is echoing it. Your emotions aren't always responses. They're reverberations, memories, wounds, unfinished sentences from the past. This is the illusion you've lived inside for years, that the world has power over you. That if you just learn the right skills, say the right words, avoid the wrong people, you'll be safe. That if you're good enough, strong enough, calm enough, loving enough, you won't get hurt. That you can control your way out of pain. But you can't, because control is a myth. It's the armor you forged as a child, when you first realized the world could be cruel, unpredictable, or worse, indifferent. It was your shield against chaos, but now, as an adult, it's become your prison. You're no longer protecting yourself, you're keeping yourself from growing. Control never made you invincible, it made you numb. It didn't shield you from pain. It buried it so deep that now you don't even know why you're hurting anymore. That's why criticism still cuts you. That's why rejection still haunts you. That's why silence still makes your chest tighten. Because deep down, some part of you still believes that if you had just been more, it wouldn't have happened. That if you had just tried harder, said it differently, stayed quiet, spoken up, let go, held on, then maybe, just maybe. But here's the paradox. The more you try to not feel pain, the more power it has over you. Think about it. The people who seem unshakable, who walk through chaos with clarity, do they look like they're resisting life? Or do they look like they've accepted something you haven't? You see, Jung never promised that you would be free of suffering. He promised something deeper, that through suffering, you would find the truth of who you are. He didn't teach you to avoid your wounds. He taught you to turn toward them, to integrate them, to stop hiding from the parts of yourself you've labeled unlovable, because nothing can hurt you more than what you've already buried inside. And nothing can heal you faster than bringing that buried thing into the light. So the real question isn't how do I stop getting hurt? It's what part of me still believes that I deserve to be? Most people live their entire lives trying to outrun this question. They accumulate success, admiration, self-help books, spiritual practices, external armor. But they still crack under pressure. They still fall apart when love ends. They still collapse under loneliness, even surrounded by people. Because the enemy was never out there. The enemy is the war you're still fighting in here, with yourself. But there is a way out. Not through denial, not through control, not through emotional suppression dressed as strength. The way out is through awareness, through truth, through reintegration. You don't need more motivation, you don't need more affirmations, you don't need more fake confidence. What you need is to stop running and start facing. Start listening to the part of you that breaks so easily, because that's the part that's begging to be healed. And the moment you do, something fundamental shifts. The outer world begins to lose its grip on your emotional state. Words still reach you, but they no longer define you. Rejection stings, but it doesn't own you. Loss hurts, but it doesn't hollow you out. Because you're not surviving anymore. You're awakening. Picture this. You're walking through your day, doing everything right. You respond politely, get your tasks done, keep your tone measured, even when frustration simmers beneath the surface. Then someone says it, that one phrase. Maybe it's innocent, maybe it's passive-aggressive, but whatever it is, it lands like a knife. And you spiral. You obsess over it, replaying it in your mind. You imagine what you should have said. You feel the tension in your shoulders, your jaw, your chest. You want to scream or disappear or both. And in that moment, you're not responding to that person. You're reacting to something much older, something buried. That's the echo. Carl Jung called it the unconscious. Not because it's asleep, but because you are, at least to its contents. Your childhood shame, your unmet needs, your buried fear of abandonment, they live there. And when someone says something that hits a nerve, it's not their voice you hear. It's your father's, your mother's, that teacher, that ex, that moment when you were too small, too voiceless, too afraid to fight back. The unconscious is not just a place of repression. It's a force. It's active. It remembers everything you pretend to forget. And until you see it, you serve it. Not with awareness, but with reactivity. This is why you collapse after a small rejection, why your partner's silence feels like suffocation, why the idea of failure sends you into overdrive, trying to prove your worth before someone sees your cracks. It's not about what's happening. It's about what it reminds you of. Every overreaction is an invitation. It says, look here, this pain is older than today. But instead of looking, you run. You rationalize, you blame. You pretend it didn't matter. You scroll, you drink, you overwork, you ghost, you gaslight yourself. And still the echo grows louder, because the unconscious has only one goal, to be made conscious. Not to punish you, but to wake you up. That's why it hides in plain sight, in your habits, in your triggers, in the patterns you can't seem to break. You say, I don't know why I keep ending up in these toxic relationships. Jung would ask, what part of you finds safety in pain that feels familiar? You say, I can't help sabotaging myself right when things are going well. He'd ask, what internal belief is threatened by success? This isn't psychobabble, it's survival wiring. When your younger self internalized the idea that love means abandonment, or that safety means silence, or that worth comes from performance, those beliefs became emotional reflexes. They fire long before your thinking brain catches up. That's why insight isn't enough. You can understand your trauma and still live inside it. You can name your patterns and still repeat them. The shift happens when you no longer identify with the wounded part, but you listen to it. You don't drown in the echo, you trace it to its origin. Jung didn't tell us to fix ourselves. He told us to face ourselves, to stop amputating the parts we don't like, to stop hiding the fear, the envy, the rage, the shame, not to act on them, but to own them, because what you deny owns you. What you accept integrates. This is why your healing won't come from becoming bulletproof. It will come from becoming transparent with yourself, not invulnerable, just unshakable. Because once you see that your emotional reactions are echoes, not facts, you stop worshiping them. You stop letting them control your relationships, your decisions, your self-worth. You realize, I am not this reaction. I am the one witnessing it. That is the first moment of freedom. And in that space, something else opens, a deeper awareness, a stillness, the power to respond instead of react, the clarity to see someone's insult not as a dagger, but as data, the strength to walk away, not out of pride, but out of peace. So when you ask, how do I stop getting hurt? The real answer is, you stop being so fused with the part of you that's still bleeding. You stop expecting the world to stop poking your wounds, and start asking why the wound is still open in the first place. You stop controlling others and start becoming conscious of yourself. Because the world will not stop being chaotic. People will still be careless. Words will still cut. Life will still surprise you with its cruelty. But the question is no longer, will it hurt? The question becomes, is there still a wound inside me waiting for it to? And when the answer is no, when you've brought your darkness into the light, nothing and nobody can hurt you the same way again. You've been praised for your strength. People admire how composed you are, how you always seem in control. They tell you you're resilient, calm under pressure, tough, and you wear that praise like armor. But here's the question that quietly gnaws at you when the room is quiet, when the applause fades. What if the version of you they admire isn't real? What if your strength is just the most socially acceptable version of your fear? Because here's the truth, no one wants to say, what we often call strength is really emotional paralysis. It's the mask that says I'm fine while you're screaming behind your teeth. It's the smile you wear like war paint. The silence you maintain when your heart is begging to speak. Carl Jung didn't see the persona, the social mask, as evil. He saw it as necessary. We all need it to function, to belong, to navigate society. But he also warned, the persona is a system of behavior by which we relate to the world, but it is only a mask of the collective psyche. In other words, it's not you. It's the version of you you built to survive. That version was useful once, maybe even life-saving. Maybe you learned early on that showing emotion was dangerous, or that vulnerability invited rejection. So you became competent, or agreeable, or hyper-independent. You became what the world rewarded and abandoned what it didn't. But now that mask is suffocating you, because you've confused strength with suppression. You've confused control with wholeness. You've confused surviving with living, and that confusion has a cost. Every time you deny your sadness to appear strong, it burrows deeper. Every time you ignore your anger, it calcifies. Every time you pretend you're over something that shattered you, it lingers like smoke in your lungs. And eventually, the mask you wear to protect yourself begins to feel like your only face. But your soul knows better. That's why you feel distant from your own life. That's why your relationships feel thin. That's why joy feels brief and relief never lasts. Because the mask cannot feel. It can only perform. And here's the paradox that keeps you stuck. You think the mask is what protects you from pain, but in reality, the mask is what keeps the pain alive. You think, if I stop pretending I'm okay, I'll fall apart. But what if that breakdown is the beginning of your breakthrough? What if falling apart isn't a failure, but a form of integration? Jung believed that what we suppress becomes shadow, not evil, just unseen, unacknowledged. The parts of you that were too much or not enough, the neediness, the fragility, the fear of abandonment. You think you've outgrown those parts, but they are alive, just hidden. And what's hidden doesn't heal. It haunts. You might not cry in public, but your body cries in the form of tension, insomnia, migraines. You might not rage, but your heart simmers in resentment and passive withdrawal. You might not ask for help, but your silence grows heavy enough to collapse under. So, what would happen if you took off the mask? Not all at once, just a crack. Just enough to let something real slip through, just enough to say, actually, no, I'm not fine. Yes, that did hurt me. I don't want to be the strong one today. What would happen if you risked being seen not as unbreakable, but as human? Would the world fall apart? Or would you finally feel like you're living in it? Jung said, know all the theories, master all the techniques, but as you touch a human soul, be just another human soul. That applies to yourself too. The part of you that's hurting doesn't need you to be a therapist or a coach. It needs you to be real, present, honest, human. Because true strength is not cold. It's warm. It's not distant. It's intimate. It's not perfect. It's honest. It says, I have scars, and I don't hide them anymore. That is what makes you untouchable, not because you've become immune to pain, but because you've stopped betraying yourself to avoid it. You don't build emotional immunity by locking the world out. You build it by letting yourself all the way in. And when you do, when you stop running from what lives inside you, nothing outside you can dominate your inner world again. You become whole, and wholeness cannot be manipulated. Pain doesn't knock gently. It kicks the door open. It floods your system. It rearranges your plans. It destroys your sense of order. You try to hold the pieces together, but they slip through your fingers like wet glass. And in that moment, when you're breaking and bleeding and begging for relief, you ask the question everyone eventually asks, why is this happening to me? But Jung would ask you a different question. What is this pain trying to reveal? We are conditioned to see suffering as failure, as weakness, as a sign that something is wrong and needs to be fixed, or more often buried. We are taught to turn away from it, to medicate it, spiritualize it, distract ourselves from it, rationalize it out of existence. But pain doesn't vanish just because you look away. It waits. And if you wait long enough too, it transforms. It shapeshifts into fatigue, numbness, depression, anxiety, irritability, self-sabotage. It creeps into your relationships and whispers doubts in your most tender moments. It becomes the silent architect of your identity, an identity that isn't really yours, but a sculpture built from avoidance. Carl Jung didn't see pain as a problem to eliminate. He saw it as the messenger of the unconscious, the voice of the parts of you you've silenced, neglected, or disowned. The inner child you told to shut up, the anger you stuffed because it was too much, the grief you never gave time or space to become tears. He said, "Depression is like a woman in black. If she turns up, don't shoo her away. Invite her in, offer her a seat, and listen to what she has to say." You don't listen to your pain, you run from it. You do everything in your power to keep the illusion intact. I'm okay, I'm managing, it's not that bad. But beneath that denial is a part of you crying out, "See me, feel me, let me speak." Because pain is not just an emotional inconvenience, it's the threshold to transformation. Imagine you're lost in a dark forest. You can't see the path, you don't recognize the terrain, and every step forward feels dangerous. That's what true suffering feels like. But in Jungian psychology, that forest is sacred. It's the symbolic descent into the unconscious, the hero's journey inward, the death of false identity. It's where you meet the self. Not the curated version, not the one your parents wanted, not the one you created to get through school or your last relationship, but the real you, the one you've been avoiding because it contains all the things you were taught to hide. Pain is the invitation to enter that forest. It says, you're not done growing. You're not done remembering who you are. You're not done healing. And when you finally stop running, when you sit with that pain instead of silencing it, something happens. You realize it's not trying to destroy you. It's trying to rebuild you. But first it has to burn away what no longer serves you. That's why it hurts. Because something inside you is dying. Something false. An outdated identity. A belief you inherited but never questioned. A survival strategy that helped once but is now keeping you stuck. And death always feels like disaster until you realize it's transformation. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming whole. Not perfect, not happy all the time, but real, integrated, conscious. To individuate is to walk through your own darkness with open eyes, to hold your rage without becoming cruel, to feel your grief without becoming broken, to understand your fear without letting it control you, to finally stop pretending you don't feel what you feel. Because when you face your pain without judgment, something extraordinary happens. It starts speaking the truth. It says, you didn't deserve what happened. It says, you've been carrying a burden that was never yours. It says, you don't have to keep proving you're enough. It says, there is still beauty inside you, even now. It says, there is more of you waiting to be found. And that truth is what sets you free. Not because it erases the past, but because it dismantles the lie that your pain defined you. That what happened to you is who you are. That healing means forgetting. It doesn't. It means remembering in a new way. Pain becomes sacred the moment it reveals the self beneath the scar. So stop asking, how do I make it go away? Start asking, what is this pain demanding me to become? Because when you answer that call, when you walk willingly into the shadow instead of resisting it, you come out changed. Not protected, but prepared. Not harder, but deeper. Not unfeeling, but unbreakable. And from that depth, nothing and nobody can ever control you again. Not because they won't try, but because there's nothing left in you for them to hook into. You've seen your pain. You've heard its voice. You've made it part of your truth. And now, you are whole. You've walked through the fire. You've stared into the face of your pain, and instead of flinching, you said, speak. You didn't run. You didn't numb. You listened. And in listening, you became something different, not tougher, but truer. Not colder, but more alive. But here's the next threshold, the one that few talk about, the one that's harder than confronting your shadow. What happens after the storm ends? What do you become when you're no longer defined by pain, reaction, or the need to protect yourself? Carl Jung called it individuation, but it goes beyond psychology. It's the birth of a self that is whole, not fragmented by fear, not splintered by performance, not twisted to please. You become someone who knows who they are, and when you know who you are, nothing outside you has the power to undo you. Not rejection, not betrayal, not judgment, not even loss, because they no longer land on a wound, they land on clarity. But to reach that clarity, you had to give up something, the illusion of safety through control. You had to surrender the masks, the armor. The false self that always sought approval or feared abandonment, that self was a scaffold. It got you this far. But now you're standing on your own foundation. And here's what that foundation feels like. It's the moment someone tries to manipulate you and you feel nothing but calm. The moment someone ghosted you and instead of spiraling, you breathe. The moment criticism comes and you hear it as data, not identity. The moment chaos erupts and you move like water, fluid, centered, awake. Because your center isn't out there anymore. It's here, in you. Built from the ruins of every part you used to disown. When you stop running from your unconscious, it stops running you. That's what Jung meant when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Not what society says, not what your trauma shaped, not what your ego defends, but the self that emerges when nothing is denied and nothing is exaggerated, just accepted, integrated, understood. And the more whole you become, the less reactive you are. You don't explode, you respond. You don't ghost, you speak. You don't control, you observe. Because emotional maturity isn't about suppressing your feelings, it's about knowing where they come from and what they're asking for. No longer hijacked by old stories, you start writing your own. But make no mistake, this isn't about becoming untouchable through detachment. That's the ego's trick. Don't care about anything, and you'll never be hurt. That's not healing. That's withdrawal. That's bitterness wrapped in false peace. True inner power doesn't avoid feeling. It expands your capacity to feel without losing your shape. It's the difference between drowning and swimming in deep water. The waves still move you, but they don't toss you. You still feel heartbreak, but it no longer threatens your identity. You still love, deeply, but not from desperation, from fullness. You don't need people to complete you. You don't need approval to stabilize you. You don't need control to feel safe. You've become your own anchor. And now, you see it all with new eyes. The criticism, projection. The betrayal, their story, not yours. The silence, a lesson in who's capable of meeting you. None of it defines you. This is the final shift. You are no longer a puppet of external forces. You don't need to manipulate your image, your words, or your relationships to prevent pain. You are not trying to be bulletproof. You simply don't leak power anymore. You've become sovereign over your own emotional terrain. And that's what Jung pointed to all along. Not the fantasy of a life without hardship, but the reality of a self that can meet anything with presence. That doesn't need to defend or escape because it no longer sees the world as a threat. It sees it as a mirror. And now, when something stings, you don't collapse. You pause. You witness. You ask, is this about now, or is it touching something old? And from that space you choose. That's what it means to be untouchable, not to float above life, but to stand firmly in its center, unmoved by the wind, unbroken by the waves, grounded in self-awareness. And when you live from that center, people notice. They don't quite know what it is, but they feel it. Your presence, your peace, your unwillingness to perform, your quiet refusal to betray yourself for connection. You're not chasing validation anymore, you're choosing alignment. You've stopped surviving. You've started inhabiting yourself. You once thought strength was built from layers, armor stacked over wounds, detachment over desire, silence over rage. But now, standing at the far edge of yourself, you know something deeper. Clarity is the only protection you ever needed. Not clarity in the intellectual sense, not a set of theories or philosophies, but the kind that lives in the body, the kind that burns through confusion like fire through fog, the kind that says, I see. And in seeing, you are no longer ruled. Carl Jung never promised the world would become safer. He never suggested that awakening would make life easier. If anything, the deeper you go into consciousness, the more you feel, the more you grieve, the more awake you become to the tragedy, cruelty, and impermanence of things. But paradoxically, that awakening is what makes you free. Because now you are no longer mistaking illusion for reality. You're no longer caught in the trance of, they have to treat me better for me to feel okay. You're no longer stuck in the loop of, if I try harder, maybe they'll love me the way I need. You're no longer trying to bend reality to match your inner wounds. You've stopped outsourcing your peace. Because you've seen it clearly, the world is not here to protect you. It's here to reflect you, to show you what's left to integrate, to bring up the old wounds, not to punish you, but to invite you deeper into yourself. Clarity breaks the spell. It says, this pattern isn't fate, it's habit. This trigger isn't about them. It's an echo from before. This emotion isn't dangerous, it's just information. And with that awareness, pain loses its sharpness. Not because you've numbed it, but because you've understood it. It no longer confuses you. It no longer surprises you. You don't run from it, you walk with it. You ask, "What are you here to teach me?" And in that question, you reclaim your life. Because what you used to call fate, you now recognize as unconscious choice. What you used to call heartbreak, you now see as the breaking of illusions. What you used to fear, the confrontation, the silence, the rejection, you now understand as essential thresholds. Clarity doesn't make you invincible, it makes you incorruptible. You still feel. But you don't become what you feel. You still love, but not from scarcity. You still cry, but you don't drown. And that shift, it changes everything. You begin to speak less, but mean more. You listen deeper because you're not bracing for attack. You love cleaner because you no longer give to get. You move through the world not to be liked, but to be aligned. Because clarity isn't a wall, it's a filter. It lets in what serves and releases what doesn't, without drama, without collapse. And that's why no one can hurt you the way they once did. Because now when someone lashes out, you see their wound, not your worth. When someone walks away, you see the truth, not a confirmation of your fear. When life shifts suddenly, you meet it with presence, not panic. You've stopped asking, why is this happening to me? You've started asking, what is this showing me about me? And that change in orientation is the end of victimhood and the birth of responsibility, not blame, not guilt, but the power to say, this is mine to own, this is mine to heal, this is mine to alchemize. You no longer demand the world to be safe, you become a sanctuary within it. That's what Jung meant when he said, your visions will become clear only when you look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. And now, you're awake. Not enlightened in some mystical, unreachable sense, but awake in the way that matters most. You see your patterns, you hear your inner voice, you feel your intuition. You know who you are, and no one can take that from you, not because they won't try, but because there's no part of you left that believes they can. You've integrated your shadow. You've held space for your wounds. You've let go of false selves. And now, standing in your center, you realize nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. If this truth touched something in you, don't let it fade. Let this be the moment you stop pretending. Let this be the day you stop running. Let this be the threshold you cross and never look back. And if you feel it, if something in you is finally awake, type it. Write it where others can see it. Say it like a vow. I choose awareness. Because the world doesn't need more people pretending to be strong. It needs people who have become whole.